I am a female, and I was 15 at the time of this experience. One night, my two sisters and I wanted to stay up and have some fun. So we set up camp in the living room. I got the reclining chair while my 7-year-old sister Amelia slept on an air mattress on the floor. My older sister Claire, who was 20, slept on the couch. We all chatted about drama, school, boys, and other stuff. We did stay up pretty late, but one by one, we all eventually fell asleep. I woke up some time later. I didn't know why until I heard it. There was a tapping sound coming from the window. I look over, and the curtains were drawn, but the chair that I was resting in was positioned in such a way that I could see through the gap in the curtains. I saw someone standing just outside. They then crouched down, and I caught a glimpse of an eye looking right at me. I'm still not sure if they could see me because of the poor lighting, but I was freaking out inside. The person stopped tapping and just stood there, looking through the gap in the curtains. I could not tell you what this person looked like. Most of their features were obscured by the curtains. I slowly turned over and covered myself up with a blanket, thinking that it must have been one of our sketchy neighbors or a peeping Tom, and that they would eventually go away. As I lay there facing the wall, there suddenly came a loud bang. I turned back to the window, and I saw the shadow of the person still standing by the window, but now they were slamming their fists against the window's surface. They were not trying to be stealthy whatsoever. I hate to say it, but I just kind of froze up until I heard Amelia moving around on the mattress. Shortly after, she began crying as soon as she saw the figure standing outside the window. The protective big sister inside of me snapped me out of my trance, and I tossed my blanket to the side, and I got up as quickly as I could. I knew that if the intruder broke the glass, my little sister would be in the crossfire. I picked her up and ran to the couch that Claire was sleeping on. Unfortunately, it was up against the same wall as the window, so now Amelia was crying even harder. I should mention that Claire does suffer from a sleeping disorder that she inherited from my father. Both of them have to take sleeping pills, which means once they pass out, it's next to impossible to wake them up. Given the circumstances, I tried anyway. I heard Claire mumbling something along the lines of, "Go away." I then tugged on her hair until I practically pulled her halfway off the couch. I then heard the window starting to crack. The glass was thick, but it was still possible to break it with enough force. I tried one last desperate attempt to wake Claire up. But then, the unthinkable happened. The glass shattered as the intruder hurled himself through the window, crash landing on the living room floor. Amelia and I backed away as the figure slowly stood to his feet. He then turned his head. I could not make out his face, but I could tell that there were several pieces of broken glass sticking out of his cheek and neck. He had landed right on top of the broken glass. I felt shitty for leaving Claire behind, but I had to think about my little sister. We ran to the basement, which was not the best place to hide, but I was in full panic mode at this point. We quickly went to the back of the basement and hid behind a half wall that separated the room into two sections. We heard shuffling sounds from upstairs before all went silent. After several minutes, we heard sirens in the distance. About 5 minutes later, 2 cops opened the basement door. Claire was injured from the broken glass, but otherwise, she was okay. The intruder managed to slip away before the cops arrived. I have a feeling that it was one of our neighbors, or at least they were staying at one of their houses, because a guy who had just thrown himself through a glass window would be hard to miss on a patrol. Somebody else from up the street saw someone suspicious walking down the road and decided to call the cops. They entered our house once they saw the broken glass window from the road. To this day, whoever it was has never been caught. This took place in my small hometown in Texas, which isn't too far away from Austin, when I was about 5 years old. It was the early 1980s, and crime in our town was slim to none. It wasn't uncommon for kids to wait in the car, while our parents went into the grocery store or gas station. Those were different times. My parents drove around a Buick LeSabre from the 1970s. It was cream-colored, two-door, with a brown vinyl top. Very old school. It had electric locks and windows, and that will be important later on. One day my mother and I took a trip to the grocery store. My big brother decided to stay home and play video games. Looking back, I wish I would have stayed with him. When we got to the store, I decided to wait in the car. My mom lowered the windows a little more than halfway before she left. If you're unfamiliar with two-door model cars from the 70s era, they had enormous windows. It wasn't summer yet, so I was comfortable with the outside temperature. I was sitting in the front passenger seat. I don't know how much time went by, but it wasn't long before a small red truck hauling a camper pulled up on my right side. Instead of getting out and going inside, the driver just sat there. He kept looking at me, then back to the parking lot, and then back to me. I wanted to roll up the windows, but I didn't have the keys. Fortunately for me, there were some people out and about, but he wasn't going to give up so easily. He opened his door and climbed out of his cab, still looking at me, then scanning the parking lot again. By this point, every alarm bell was going off in my head. I crawled into the back seat to put as much distance between him and me as possible. If he was going to try to break into the car and snatch me, I wanted to make it as difficult for him as possible, and hopefully somebody would see him and intervene. Not bad for a 5-year-old. My heart was pounding. I knew that one of two things was going to happen. I was either going to be taken, or I was going to get away. Even with the windows more than halfway down, I knew that he still didn't have enough room to pull me through. And if he managed to unlock the door and open it, I decided that I would try to escape through the opposite door. As soon as the man reached through the passenger window for the manual lock, I saw my mom emerging from the store. I opened the door and bolted toward her. As soon as I got to her, I saw the truck hauling ass out of the parking lot. If it hadn't been for my mom showing up when she did, or those cheesy educational videos about stranger danger they showed at my school, I might not have made it. I may have been just a kid back then, but I knew what that guy was up to. From that day on, I never waited in the car again. This experience made me super aware when I had my own daughter. Some people might call me overprotective, but you just can't take chances in today's world. To give you some background, I grew up in a small town in Vermont, in a large house in the middle of the woods, which was located on a massive hillside. My birthday is in December, and I eventually began a tradition of having a sleepover party with my close friends. We would play outdoor games and watch movies all night. On the year of my 14th birthday, I invited 4 of my friends over: Jay, Hunter, Eli, and Samuel. I attended Jay's birthday party a couple of months prior, and it was there that they introduced me to a game they invented called Evil Cat Mafia, which was a mashup of Manhunt and Mafia. One person is secretly chosen to be the Mafia, and everyone else has to avoid getting tagged by them. Those who are captured become part of the Mafia as well. This game was best played in the dark, which was perfect because it got dark around 5 o'clock in December. This particular year, our group was very much into the game. To be honest, there wasn't a whole lot to do back then. We had to devise a special call to signal that the game had been called off for whatever reason. On the night in question, we were about 3 rounds in, and it was well past dark. Our vision was impaired by a soft but constant snowfall. Eli and I were heading toward a clearing between my house and my neighbor's. Eli suddenly stopped and motioned for me to stop as well. "Do you see that?" "See what?" He pointed to a pair of small oak trees in the center of the clearing, just ahead of us. Between them was a dark outline. At first, I thought it was one of my neighbors out for a night stroll, but the longer I looked, the more that I realized that this thing had no features at all. No eyes, mouth, or even hair. It was either someone wearing a full-body suit, or perhaps it was something else. The dark shape stood in contrast to the night sky. It's hard to explain, but it was like looking into a black void. It then began moving towards us. Its movements were unnatural, like a stop-motion animation. "Run!" Eli shouted, and we both took off back down the trail. As we ran, I heard what sounded like a low creaking sound coming from the direction of the clearing. I glanced behind me, and I saw that we were being followed. The figure seemed to change as it pursued us. Its arms were unnaturally thin and long, and its overall mass had expanded dramatically, becoming much larger than it was before. We hurried back to my house, calling for everybody to come out and signaling that the game had been cut short. We got to the clearing outside my house and saw Jay, Hunter, and Sam outside my garage. Jay then called out to us. "What's going on?" "No time to explain. Let's get inside first." We all hurried inside the garage and closed the door. After Eli and I caught our breath, I explained. "There was something out there chasing us. It was like this shadow person or something." "You're not making any sense. How could you see it if it was dark?" "I don't know, man. It was like it was darker than everything else around it somehow. It was like a black hole or something." I was cut off by a long moan coming from the forest. A short time later, my dad opened the garage door. "What's going on in here?" My dad was obviously confused about why we were all hiding out in the garage. We tried to explain to him, but of course, he didn't believe us. He might have thought it was part of a game or something. "Dad, did you not hear that just now?" "No, I didn't hear anything. Stop fooling around." It was frustrating, but there was no point in arguing with my dad, and we managed to move on with our night, opting to eat pizza while watching The Joy of Painting with Bob Ross instead of going back outside. Hunter remarked that he had seen Jay running toward the house even before Eli and I had called off the game. Jay explained that he also saw a strange dark figure in the forest and somehow knew that it wasn't any of us. "You didn't think to warn us?" "Look, I wasn't 100% sure. By the time I got back to the house, Hunter was already there. Then you and Eli came running out of the woods." "Hey Hunter, did you see anything?" "No. I just figured that none of you would think to look around the garage." We decided to end that whole conversation for the night, as it was freaking us out. We eventually all fell asleep. I'm not sure if this next part was a dream or a nightmare, but I do have a faint memory of being woken up by a distant moaning sound coming from the forest. Ever since that night, I have this fear of looking out my window and seeing a dark mass across the field, standing right on the forest's edge. I can see it so clearly in my mind. This happened many years ago, and I'm now attending college, so I don't go home very often, and hopefully, I'll never encounter that thing again. Thank you for watching. If you have a story that you would like to share on this channel, please send it to my email, unit522stories@outlook.com. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button when notifications turned on. You can further support my channel by visiting the merch store. A link for that is in the description. You'll be hearing from me soon. Until next time, I'm your Uncle Unit. And as always, never forget.